to bring you today's Founder to Founder. Today we're featuring their Rosé, which is a dry rose wine of theirs. If you remember from our January Founder to Founder with Taylor, we talked about the cool climate wines, and so they say that this wine is great for the days that end with a Y. And having just come from Leland, I could not agree more, as we had a little glass of this probably every day we were up there.
That's awesome.
So if you are interested in getting a bottle, don't forget to use more wine, as you'll get free shipping on any orders over $100. Hello, and welcome back to another Founder to Founder. Today I am sitting in Oakland Nursery Green Interiors with Genevieve, and we are going to be talking a bit about servant leadership, building a team, and about the green industry, which I'm really excited about. So,
Awesome.
Do you mind introducing yourself?
No, not at all. So my name is Genevieve Mills. I am a third generation family member here at Oakland Nursery. I started my career actually in the business growing up, but then left because I was not going to be in the business. And then, of course, I came back. I spent 5 years as an attorney doing prosecuting work here in Columbus, and basically kind of got burnt out and was like, maybe they need an attorney at my family business. And convinced my dad to bring me back full time, and worked through landscape design, touched a little bit of retail, but not much, and then ended up in the Green Interiors department, where I got way into helping sort of build this department up from something kind of small to something really big. This department does interior plant design, moss walls, living plant walls, containers and rooftop plantings, and then holiday decor. So we have like a weird niche industry position, but it's super fun and it's super creative. So I've been running this department since 2017.
That's awesome, and it's such a cool space. I mean, I love what you've set up, and talking about just bringing life into interior spaces that might not have it in such a unique way. It's so cool, and I didn't know until we were talking a little bit ago that you had a background in law.
Yes.
And so it's really cool. I feel like I know a few lawyers who have made a shift from law into like more of that entrepreneurial like leadership in a completely different industry.
Yes.
What has that been like, changing industries?
It's been surprisingly, there's a lot of similarities to, I would say, the law and the green industry. They're both male dominated typically, and there's a lot of problem solving. In the law, you're just solving problems where you're using past cases, and you're just trying to help people figure out their crisis at the moment. In the green industry, you're figuring out how to put a plant in, or how do you design this thing, or what happens if something crashes, or how do I get enough people in the right spot. So it's just problem solving, and you're still working with a team, but instead of a team of attorneys and paralegals, you're working with a team of designers and installers. So the transition was like on a big level not very complicated, but from like a emotional sort of mental level, it was way better, because literally all we do is make things pretty. We install backyard landscapes and rooftops and like beautiful plants, and in the law you're frequently working sort of retroactively to fix a problem of something bad that has happened, like whether it's financial or legal, or so you're solving like a bad problem. Here we solve good problems. People want to make their spaces prettier. So for me, emotionally, it was just such a pleasant shift in my job career path that I was like, this is great. Like, I don't have to worry about putting this person in prison. Instead, I worry about, do we have enough plants on this rooftop?
Yes, I mean, that definitely feels like a lighter workload.
Yeah. Yes.
No, that's awesome. As you talk about it, like talking about bringing like the pretty things into another person's space, and some of that like emotional lightening, do you see that in the workplace as well? I'm curating content right now for issue 5, which is going to come out soon, and we're talking a lot about how women leaders especially just have a little bit more of that empathy in the workplace. I'm not saying always, but there is some of that emotional intelligence that comes with it. So do you sense that switching industries, or was it very much varying by leader?
It varies by leader for sure. But yeah, I'm an emotionally empathetic person sort of by nature. When I was practicing law, I did a lot of what it was called alternative dispute resolution. So instead of looking at the law as like you against me, it was more we're working together to solve a problem and to use things like mediation, negotiation techniques to try to fix something in a more holistic manner. So even when I was prosecuting and negotiating cases, my natural tendency was to like figure out a way, let's work together. How do we make every party feel sort of whole again in whatever circumstances? So in this application, yes, like my people and my team are obviously individual human beings with feelings and emotions and life goals and careers, and my goal is to help nurture that and, you know, be supportive. And, you know, we have some other moms on our staff and I'm a mom, and like, you know, life happens, kid stuff happens, you know, people get COVID and all these things happen, and, you know, bringing that emotional intelligence to the workplace and being like, I understand that you can't come to work today because your kid is sick or your husband just got COVID or, you know, your dog died. Like, that part is really important to me so that people feel like they can come to a workplace where they're, you know, appreciated and understood, and it's not just like you're here to punch a clock, do the job for me, and then leave. It's so much more than that. And I think because of that, you know, over the last several years, we've started building a really solid team of people who, you know, they like coming to work in the morning because they know they're respected and appreciated.
That makes a lot of sense.
Thanks. We tried. I mean, every day's a challenge, and I have bad days too, and you get frustrated with, you know, if something goes sideways. But, you know, we've gotten to the point where we all understand that people have bad days. So if somebody has a meltdown or a freak out, like, don't take it personally. Like, we'll recover and we move on, and everybody hugs, and there's sometimes crying, but like, yeah.
That's really cool. I hear you kind of giving yourself grace in that when you say that you have harder days too, because I'm in my 20s and I've been moving into leadership positions, which I very humbly say I feel like I have a lot of leadership qualities, and I enjoy leading. Similar, you talk about servant leadership, and that's how I like to serve as well. And for me, being so early in my career and early in my leadership, I sometimes have a really hard time giving myself grace. How has that been for you as you've grown in your leadership?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's hard sometimes because I come from a family of sort of more top-down leadership, and sometimes my natural inclination is to like drift into like, I just need you to do this, just do it. And sometimes that is the right response, because sometimes the stuff just has to get done and someone has to tell someone how to do it. But I prefer to be, you know, more with the crew and with my team. You know, I like to be out with them in the field. I like to show them that, like, you know, I don't sit at a desk all day long. I actually really like being out in the field. Like, I'm a task-oriented person, so completing things is very satisfying. So, you know, desk work is not satisfying. But like going out and at the end of the day, you've planted something beautiful or you've built something beautiful, like you're like, oh, I did that. So I like to be out with them. And then it's, you know, it's good for them to be like, you know, the boss isn't just sitting here behind her computer screen barking out orders and directions. And then you get, you know, as, you know, being out with my people and spending time with them, you get to know them as humans and you get to know their personalities. And it turns out most of my staff skews younger, 20s and 30s, and they're awesome and hilarious, and they teach me all sorts of goofy stuff, and it's really fun. And then, you know, so what I do is while I'm out there, I try to, like, you know, coach them on things and give them sort of light direction and guidance. And we talk about everything from, like, relationships to work stuff to, like, you know, past, you know, dramas and things. And, you know, I get to be sort of, hopefully, a mentor and a support system so that when they move on, if they choose to move on, they can at least look back and be like, I had a good experience. I've learned a lot of things. I learned some, you know, leadership skills or problem-solving skills, or just developed confidence in my own abilities to make decisions or solve problems, or, you know, build a moss wall or something crazy.
Yeah.
So
no, that's really cool. And I feel like So I have a 9 to 5 outside of the magazine, and we've been talking a lot about like retention and what employees want. And a lot of what we've heard has been we want to feel like we can be developed without the company feeling like threatened that we might leave. And with the magazine, through the internships, like I know that I'm a stepping stone. And I think it's so cool to hear other leaders talk about it in that mindset of like, it is okay if you leave someday, but I want you to leave with your cup slightly fuller than when you came here.
Yes.
And so that's really, I don't know, I love hearing it from like people who've been in leadership roles longer than me, because it makes me excited that other people are going to have that opportunity.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously through college, like you have internships where it's like they just use you because they know that you're not staying.
Right.
But to be like in those like more intentional workplaces that people really want to grow you, just because you are another person who's developing and learning, and you're going to add to another place, whether it's you stay or you go somewhere else. I just, that gives me so many warm fuzzies, and it just
awesome.
makes me so happy to hear.
Yeah, no, it is important, because like the alternative is what? You keep your employees sort of at the same baseline for a long time, and they don't learn anything, and they're unhappy, and so then they're doing sort of a mediocre job. And yes, there's always a risk that you can lose people, but there's also the chance that they stay and they like, you know, decide that like this is a great place to be. I want to commit to something for some period of time, and then you're like, awesome, you're like a well-rounded employee and you know a lot of stuff, and I can trust you to do stuff, and I don't have to carry the burden of remembering all of the things. So yeah, it's always a risk, but like again, like these are people who, you know, there's their lives, like they might not want to work on a landscape crew their entire life. So, and there are some people that do, and we have employees that have been with our company for 40 years, and some of their kids work for us now, and some of them have had sort of the same role for a long time, and they're happy in that and they like that. But there are others that are like, okay, well, you know, I've done this for 5 years, what's next? Or I've done this for 2 years, and one of the things we're focusing on now is really dialing in our career paths within this department, and saying, okay, well, if you come in as a crew person doing install stuff, or you come in as a plant technician caring for the plants out in the properties we work for, you know, and you do that for 2 or 3 years, you know, where do you go from there? Do you want to be like a leader, a crew leader, or an assistant manager, or do you want to pivot to warehouse work and caring for the greenhouse, or do you want to learn design, or do you want to start dipping into sales, like, and trying to really solidify those career paths, so that when you come in as someone who's like, I like plants, I think I want to work with plants, and then we can say, all right, here's paths for you, here's futures for you, and then if it doesn't work out, great, but at least like you've had an experience here that you can then take someplace else. So I think that as a leader is so important, is like building that pipeline for people to have opportunities, so they're not just like, okay, I guess I'm gonna be like a line cook for like the next 17 years of my life or whatever.
Right. I mean, there's so much empowerment that comes from just asking people, what do you want to do, or like what direction do you want to go, and there's so much, I feel like, empowerment on like the employee side to be able to see pathways and see the different options, because then again, it's like you said, you're not just going into it blindly and saying like, I guess I'll just do this job forever,
right? Or
until something happens,
right?
Yeah.
So. Yeah, so that's something that, but it also, I think too, you have to be very intentional about it. Like, it's easy to just, fall into the busyness of the day to day of your work, and then like, a year goes by, and all of a sudden you look over and somebody is, kind of not feeling it anymore, and you have to be like, oh wait, I should check in with them. Like, how are you feeling? Do you like what you're doing? Do you want to try something else? What do you want to do? You've been doing this job now for a while, and for our this department is very small, and our company, the big company, we're big, but like we're still have a very much mom and pop mentality. So we don't have a dedicated HR department with several people who can sort of like do check-ins and evaluations and yearly, like, hey, how are you doing with your job? Like, there's one lady who does payroll and like everything else for all of us. So so we're not corporate enough to sort of think like that, but I feel it's like our responsibility as our company grows and as we as the workplace shifts and as this younger generation comes up and they're demanding more of their work life, like we owe it to them, and we have to be responsible to them to be like, okay, you've done this, how are you feeling, where do you want to go next, like, do you like it here, what do you want to do in 5 years, what do you want to do in 2 years,
right.
Like, so it's a shift in, I think, the entire way that companies have to think about their employees. And for some it's easy because it's built into their corporate, mega structure, but for smaller places,
right.
we have to stop and take a step back from the grind and say, wait a second, all these people are grinding for me, but is everyone happy still, like how we doing out there? So
yeah, I mean, and we work with so many small owned businesses, and I feel like that's honestly the shift that companies and younger people honestly kind of like more. Like, if I do have an issue or I do have a question about like my career path, I would personally rather go to my supervisor or my leader in that role and ask about that than going to HR, because it is somebody who's like in it
right.
with you, like day in and day out. And so I do think it's interesting. I talked to some of my friends who do work for like huge corporate, very like whatever companies, and it almost seems like there's a disconnect between like HR and the supervisors, because it's like they're not working together in the same capacity. So it almost makes more sense to me in my mind to have like that development kind of built into the leadership and that relationship, and for that HR. And I say this as someone who's never been in HR. I did not study it. It's very important. I know that it like protects a lot of things, so like disclaimer there. But because it's such a different department, like I feel like it can be kind of hard to like truly develop people when you're so far removed from it.
Yeah.
And overseeing like the different pieces that like more so protect the people.
Yeah.
When your supervisor or leader is working with you and they may have been in your shoes, so they can just provide more of that insight of like, here's what you could do.
Yes.
And you've talked about being in the company for so long, like whether it was part-time or full-time, and like you've grown up with it. So I feel like leading your team, you're able to share more of what that could look like for them because of how much you've been
in it. Yeah. And it's nice. It is. I mean, being of the ground up, you can kind of see everything, and then it's just so important to like just be more mindful of our employees. Again, like we're an old company, so like we had older mindsets, and people back in the day, you were just grateful to have a job, and you would just show up to work, and you'd work and you'd do your thing, and then you just did that for 40 years, and then you retired. But it's different now. I mean, and I think it's wonderful because my staff, they have lives, and I'm like, I want them to have lives. I don't want them to work 80 hours a week. I want them to go out and do things and have adventures, and like I don't want this work to be their life. Like I want it to be a part of their life, and then fostering that sort of just like conversation where like at this point now we are all in like a Teams chat, and they'll be at home and they'll be like, look at my garden, like I'm doing this thing, and like they share stuff as friends and as like people who are more than just like workplace buddies. And so it's been really nice to like watch that sort of develop, as opposed to just like people coming in and punching a clock and leaving. So
well, I think that says a lot about how you've led and how you've opened like so many channels for communication, and I know that is a conscious effort. I'm getting married next year, and so I feel like a lot of my friends are also getting married this year, and we've all been talking about like how loving someone day in and day out is like a choice. Like you are putting that effort in, and I think leadership is very similar to that. Like you do care about the people you're working with, and it is a conscious choice, kind of like what you said earlier, like how you respond to different things. If it's like I kind of need you to just do this, and like how you put your energy into them. And so you talked a lot about how servant leadership is something that you're very grounded in. Was that a natural way for you, or did you see it from somebody else?
When I was in law school, I took a couple of classes on leadership, and just because I've always been sort of interested in it, and then lawyers sort of generally are like leaders in a lot of random ways. Either like just in their jobs and what they do, people look up to lawyers, they trust them. You're in a very like sort of special position because you're a person who knows a lot of stuff, and you're expected to be able to help people or solve a problem. So there's leadership in that capacity. And then, you know, in the business world, you know, a lot of board work and things like nonprofit stuff that lawyers get into. So the leadership stuff started in law school. And then once I got back to the nursery and I just started learning just how the business worked and learning how the industry worked, I found that I really liked meeting with other people in leadership roles to learn from them how do they run their businesses, how do they manage. So I get a lot of value from talking to other leaders, whether they run you know, a marketing company or a promotional merchandising company. I have a woman who's a friend of mine who does like promotional merchandising, you know, and she makes like the t-shirts and the whatever. It's always interesting to learn from her and talk to her, and then to talk to other people who run plant businesses or green industry businesses and their leadership roles. And you learn so much. You learn a lot of good things. Sometimes you learn like, oh, I'm not going to do that. But I've, you know, continued to take leadership courses. I did a thing called Leadership Columbus years ago now, where we traveled around the city and met various like people in leadership roles, and that was interesting to see sort of how leadership writ large is important and impactful in like a, you know, a city setting, you know, like on a large scale. So I find that like the more I can learn and sort of like process and digest, the better of an employee I am, because, you know, fundamentally I still work for my family company, and, you know, I don't actually own anything yet, so I can be a better employee. That's good. And then if I can be a better leader, that helps the company as a whole. But yeah, I get so much out of talking to other people in the industry and out of the industry, but just like leaders, learning as much as I can. I try to read, although it's hard to do now because I feel like I'm so busy. But yeah, it's just something that I sort of fell into and then just really kind of stayed with. And not everyone does it. I mean, you know, not everyone is into like self-help or whatever. But for me, like, it's also nice to step back, and it forces you to step back from the day-to-day and think about things in a big picture way. And I think that's really important as a leader too. It's easy to just get bogged down in like, what are we doing tomorrow? What are we doing tomorrow? What are we doing tomorrow? And then you look up and like 10 years have gone by and like you haven't really grown and you haven't really changed and you haven't gotten better. And so working on leadership skills sort of forces you to take a step back and be like, wow, you know, like, it's 2022, like, what's going to happen in 2025? What are we going to look like then? Right. So for me, it also just sort of helps keep me focused on sort of the long game and sort of the big picture of like, you know, building a company and not just worrying about what's happening tomorrow.
Right. No, and that I feel like can be the hardest time, or the hardest thing sometimes as a leader, is expanding kind of that view that you have to see all the moving pieces and not just what's happening, because a lot of the times I feel like the what's happening right now can be super overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it can be hard, but again, you're growing people that you trust to kind of help manage the what's happening right now, so then you are able to look at the next steps.
Yes. Yeah. That's right.
Really cool.
Thanks. Yeah.
So one question I ask everyone that gets interviewed is, what is something that you do that inspires you, or how do you inspire yourself?
Well, I think this is tied back to talking to others. I really like networking, and not like in the schmoozy weird way, but I love going to conferences. I love talking to people who have, you know, been in the industry for a long time, or who are even brand new, like some of the young like students in horticulture, and I get so much out of those conversations. This department, we're part of a national group of interior-scape plant companies, and we have regular meetings where we all get together and we just share ideas, and that is fun because you talk to somebody in, you know, Alaska, and they're like, well, this is this problem, and you have this problem, and this is how I solve it, and you're like, oh, I didn't even think of that. And that is so rewarding because you're sort of all working together separately. And so for me, just talking to other people, listening and learning to their story, learning from their stories is what inspires me, and gets me excited, and then come back from a conference and tell something to my staff that I learned, and then they get excited and they're like, all right, well, let's try it, let's see if it works. And sometimes it doesn't, but like sometimes it does, and it's really great. And then I get inspired by watching my own staff do stuff like that. And I sent my middle management team to St. Louis recently on their own, like Mama didn't go, to one of these conferences, and I was like, all right, go fly the nest, kids, like do me proud. And they came back so fired up about the stuff they had learned from this company out in St. Louis, and they're like, well, they do this, and they have this idea, so we should try this, and I want to do this, and like all across the board. And I was like, yes, you guys are doing it, you're killing it. So like that made me so excited, because I was like, all right, we got this, like we're building a future. It's not all on my shoulders. These guys are deeply smart and competent, and they're gonna like take us into like the next number of years. So for me, like I get really inspired by that, and that just thrills me to no end. And I'm like, all right, I can keep doing this. So
amazing.
Yeah, so I'd say that's what it is.
That is so cool. Is there anything else that you would like to share?
I don't think. I mean, I would say that generally, like for us, we've just worked so hard, really taking this is still a very small portion of our family business. And just really committing to setting goals to try to build it. And some of them have like been revenue generating goals. Some of them have been like operational structural goals. And for us, it's been really fun and challenging to say like, okay, like we want to get to here. So working backwards, what are the steps we need to do? And then, sort of trying and seeing. And we've had some humongous successes, a couple flops, but it's okay, because we're learning, and like fundamentally we're moving in the right direction. And just being a part of something that's like so like full of moving parts, it's like the opposite of static. It's like there's a lot going on. It's very exciting. So I'm really excited to see where our company is going to go, where this department is going to go in the next 5 to 10 years, and hopefully keep my team along with me, and we'll just make something amazing.
I don't doubt it, and I'm excited to continue keeping up with you and seeing how you continue growing in this space. If our audience wants to keep up with everything that's going on, what is the best way for them to do that?
Okay, so we're on the socials at Oakland Green Interiors. We're on Instagram and Facebook. We have a website, obviously, too, but our Instagram, again, we make beautiful stuff, so it's really easy to photograph and it looks beautiful. So our Instagram is really like our showcase of all the projects we do and things like that, and some goofy pictures of us mucking around on jobs being silly. So yeah, so that would be the good place to check us out.
And we will link those below. So thank you so much for sharing time with me today.
Absolutely, it's been my pleasure.
Oh, it's been so fun. And thank you to Aurora Sellers for helping present this with us as we continue to interview more female founders. So we'll see you guys next time.